So when did the interest in loudspeakers begin?
Well, I remember finding a hi-fi in my mum and dad's loft. So I was probably about 9 or 10, something around there. And we had music around the house. I played the piano, and my brother and my sister played instruments. So there was always music going on, but no kind of high-quality hi-fi. And then, yeah, one day I was rifling around, found a whole load of LPs and a system, and kind of took it downstairs, had to play with it, and found, you know, like it really fun to listen to the music in much higher quality. And that kind of triggered an interest for me. And then I remember getting gifted a pair of speakers by my aunt as well.
What were they?
They were, I actually don't know the model number, and I don't think they were great, but they were Sony's. They're probably from an all-in-one system, but they were a lot better than I had. And yeah, I remember hooking them up and going, oh, hang on, you know, this sounds different, and you know, it sounds better. And that kind of fascinated me, and I think it went from there, really. I started building my first set of speakers when I was about 16, and actually, funnily enough, I had a really good friend of mine back where I used to live, and you know, we recorded music together. He played in a band, and I kind of acted as the studio tech a little bit. Yeah. And initially, he was the one building speakers, and I was building stuff for recording his band, like rudimentary mixing console and things. And then it completely flipped, and I was the one who was suddenly interested in speakers, and he was more interested in musical instruments and things.
Did you have a natural technical ability, your mind, the way it worked, or was that schooling?
I'm more inquisitive about physics, I guess. I probably didn't realize at the time, but yeah, how things worked, you know, take things apart, see what's inside them, that kind of thing. But then what rapidly happened was that anything at school that was kind of any applied science, so any bit of maths or physics or chemistry or anything like that, I'd just think about it in terms of, well, what does this mean for a speaker? So, you know, we'd be looking at magnets in our physics classes, and I'd be thinking, in terms of, oh, well, yeah, this is a magnet in a speaker, how does this relate to that? So that kind of became my vessel for learning in a way.
Now, it's not just Jack Oclee-Brown, it's Dr. Jack Oclee-Brown.
Yeah.
So tell us about your education.
As I say, I built a pair of speakers in the summer holidays after I'd done my GCSE 16, kind of first set of exams. Built a pair of speakers. They were not bad. They weren't great.
Did you know what you were doing?
Well, it's all relative, right? I think I did okay considering what was available to me. So I was going from textbooks using lookup tables to, you know, work out the alignment and so on. I didn't have any computer equipment. And then I was studying.
Did you know about that stuff?
Yeah, because I had some pretty good books, and I had some of the AES papers as well, so I could kind of see what I was missing. But you know, then when I was a couple of years later, 2 years into maths and physics at A-levels, I had a much better idea. And then I built another set, and that time I did a lot better. I used computer simulation. I measured the speaker with a microphone I built and things like that. So I left for university to figure out how I could design speakers. And
so that was your intention?
Yeah. I was pretty good at maths and physics at school, and I remember talking to one of my school tutors saying I wanted to study engineering, and they said, great, you know, you're good at maths and physics, great, do it. What are you thinking? And saying acoustics, and they had no idea what it was, and saying, are you sure about this? You know, and it's not really a big field, so as a, you know, I guess other students would be looking at mechanical engineering, civil engineering and things, and they, I think, were a bit worried about it, but you know, I knew it was the right thing for me, and it absolutely was. And again, you know, this kind of idea, everything I heard at university in lessons and lectures, I was thinking, you know, how does this relate to speakers again? So, and then I graduated and actually started working straight away. So before I had a PhD.
Before you had the PhD?
I came to KEF, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, actually the connection with KEF started before I graduated, because as part of engineering degree in the UK, you're encouraged to spend some time in industry. You know, either take a sandwich year and do a whole year in industry, or some vacation work. And in acoustics, a lot of the work's in noise control, and a lot of the work ends up being consultancy. And I was determined I didn't want to spend my summers, you know, measuring some noise problem, doing a survey. So I wrote to every loudspeaker company I could think of in the UK. I went through magazines to find.
And what year was this?
2002.
Okay.
And got a reply from KEF saying, come along. We're to have a 3-month internship, and we'll see how we get on. So.
And what was your first project here?
Well, when I was in 2002, I came and I was being supervised by Andy Watson, who's the previous head of acoustics, and he really was interested in improving the measurement system they had here. And you've seen the facilities we've got. They were thinking of making a new anechoic chamber, but they wanted to find a method to measure in a baffle for drivers and measure in free space for systems in one facility. So I spent more or less the whole summer thinking of different ways we could do this, then designing experiments and testing it out. And it was brilliant. I had the time of my life. It was.
And so then you went back to university?
Yeah.
And did you do cooperative terms?
They invited me back for the next summer straight away. So I kind of had that lined up. And then I kept in contact with Mark and Andy as well. And
Mark Dodd?
Mark Dodd, yeah. And then, the second summer was more doing software stuff. And that continued on a little bit into my final year at university.
And then your PhD is in?
When I graduated at the ISVR, I'd already been talking to my supervisor, Professor Phil Nelson, about maybe doing a PhD. And we had some ideas. But I thought, actually, do you know what? I wanted to design speakers for so long, and I've got this opportunity to go to KEF. I'll do that. And Phil, advised me, the PhD is open any time. I can come back and I can do that at some point, or I can do it part-time. And I had that in my mind. And so the first few years I was working at KEF, I was kind of looking around to say, well, is there something I could do that KEF are interested in and also would be good enough to qualify for a PhD as well? And actually I had a lot of false starts, things that I started working on that then either they petered out or there wasn't enough interest there from one side or the other. But the one that ran was actually for Celestion, strangely enough, which is KEF's sister company that works in pro audio equipment, and it's on compression drivers, which is a little bit detached from the KEF products. But there's some fascinating acoustics in there that me and Mark found some stuff that hadn't been done before, and then I put kind of a mathematical framework on it and did the work part-time while I was working here. And it took me a long time.
Now, did that come to be something to do with the waveguide that's on the tweeter of the UniQ?
That's right.
What do you call that?
That's the Tangerine waveguide.
Tangerine waveguide.
Yeah.
That was part of your thesis?
That was part of my thesis, yeah. A loudspeaker is not a very efficient device. And in hi-fi, we're not too worried about that because we're not trying to create such high sound pressure levels. But it's a big requirement in professional audio and PA systems that you get the efficiency up. And so they use a driver that's very different from a hi-fi driver called a compression driver, where you actually cover the output of the diaphragm to get higher efficiency. And the trouble is when you cover the diaphragm, then you get some acoustic problems that are quite hard to fix. So me and Mark were looking at how do we improve compression drivers, and we found this area of research that hadn't been done, and I put the mathematical framework on it. And then at the same time as that, KEF were interested in doing something to go over the tweeter to improve directivity and also to protect the dome. And we had the framework and the kind of purest, if you apply this framework to a really good driver, you get something even better. We in Celestion are applying it for different purposes, really big drivers to go really loud. So it came out of that. And the shaping of the channels is something that was in my thesis.
And did you originally work on certain loudspeaker projects when you came on full-time with KEF?
Yeah.
And what was your first speaker project? Like
well,
front to back?
Yeah, because of the second summer where I was mostly working on software, it was software to try and help the team be more efficient when they're doing simulations. And when I joined, a lot of my work was straight away doing simulations. That was kind of an area where they needed more resource, and I was quite happy to do that. I really enjoy working on software on the computer. So I remember getting quite a few different little bits of problem simulations where things weren't quite matching up with real prototypes. And I couldn't say if it's the first, but I remember one of the early ones was on the Mu1 UniQ. There was a mismatch between the prototype mid-range measurement and the prototype mid-range simulation, and trying to figure out why aren't these matching up. And that was tricky. That was really tricky because you have lots of different possibilities of why the simulation doesn't match up, and you have to be very, very thorough about going through everything and trying to...
And should the simulation always match up?
Well, if you don't get a good match, then you shouldn't bother doing it, right?
And we might come back to that, though. But where now is KEF in terms of simulation versus reality?
We try and be rigorous about it. So if you get a discrepancy, it's kind of like, well, let's figure out why. I remember simulation takes quite a lot of time and energy, and particularly if you're overstretching your capabilities, you can get to the point where it's not useful anymore. So if you're doing something where you spent all of your development, well, you allocated time just running one model, then was that really worthwhile? You need to be able to do, a few iterations to see if you can improve things. Mm-hmm. If you see what I mean. So it's only useful if it has any relationships between the real device, and that's something we work at KEF very hard to maintain. But in the early days, we weren't as well set up as we are now for doing that.
Now, was there original loudspeaker that you put your badge on that you designed, or line, or have you just...
No, I did contributed bits and pieces, but on the KHT 3005, which was one of the egg-shaped home cinema speakers, I remember doing like a lot of the work on the simulation for that driver, and some new bits of technology on that as well for how we were going to design the cone, and also an air seal to go around the inside of the voice coil to stop like an air problem we had with air coming through, and maybe pushing things more than I realized at the time, being young and enthusiastic, putting forward ideas and being prepared to put the work in and do the simulation, maybe not realizing that the more senior engineers was looking at this and going, well, this is kind of risky.
At that time, you were the junior guy.
Yeah, and not really realizing that I kind of rocking the boat a little bit. But the thing that was great is that actually the engineers always were really encouraging about that kind of thing, and we got the permission to make prototypes and prove the idea. So that was really the first one. I remember doing a lot of lab work as well, gluing together prototype parts and trying to get them to work as I was expecting them to.
So what's your job title now?
It's head of R&D now.
So you're on top now?
Yeah, I run the department.
So when you came in full time,
2004.
How many years? 15 years.
Yeah.
Not exactly how you moved up. What would you say allowed you to move up to this position? What skills did you bring that naturally made you progress to this position?
That's. I guess that I really believe in the engineering method. I really, we've got lots of different companies in the audio industry, but I really believe in the engineering method. That you
define the engineering method.
Well, that you should start a project by trying to work out what you want to do technically, then try and figure out how you could do it, and then put the detail in place to get
So
there.
put the result in place, what you want to achieve,
Yeah.
versus just trying to
Yeah.
see what you can do.
Yeah, and then, it's not easy to do unless you've got the tools to do it. And that's where the simulation part comes in, is saying, okay, this is what we wanted to do, how are we going to get there? And that's what I've really worked really hard at KEF. A lot of the time with software, trying to get the right tools in place that we can quite quickly say, okay, that's not possible, but that is, let's do that. Or if somebody's got an idea, of a new system where they put drivers in a different place, have we got the right tools that they can quickly sketch that and see if it'll work? And, by being very disciplined about the steps you go through, we've found we're able to improve the product quite consistently. And it's, all been really focused on product development for me.
Is that how the Blade got created? That idea of this is what we wanted to try to achieve?
Yeah, although that was early in my involvement with KEF really as an idea. I remember Mark Dodd explaining that idea to me when he visited me at Southampton University. And that must have been...
The idea of the woofers surrounding the UniQ.
That must have been 2003. So this was something he had in his mind, just from his understanding of what was required to make a single source over the whole spectrum. He already had this idea in his head. So, I mean, I've worked with Mark for so long, and you just find sometimes he's just got these ideas that just come from nowhere, and you think, wow.
So that was his idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it was a case of, okay, we've got this idea. How do we firstly show it's going to work, and then secondly, how do we go from an idea through to, a full speaker? And that's kind of what me and him did for a big chunk of time, around about 2006-07 to 2008.
Now, when you said you want to, you start with what do we want to try to achieve?
Yeah.
Have you started many projects or products with here's what we want to try to achieve, and it just wasn't feasible?
Yeah, these days actually it extends beyond product. I mean, early days when I was more, focused and junior, I was looking at tasks one at a time, and so I'd have quite specific goals. But these days it's more like a long term. Where do we want to get as KEF, and how do we get there? And so, I mean, quite often we've got a mapped out path of things we want to do, and it's kind of a question of, okay, well, what are the milestones? How, which products are going to come along at the right points to put in bits of our technology? So we have quite a long-term view, and sometimes you find you can't get something into a product that you really wanted to, but equally there's other times where something happens quicker and you can get something in you didn't expect. So it works both ways.
The UniQ.
Yeah.
You obviously believe in that.
I do.
And if somebody said to you, well, why should I believe in that?
Yeah.
What would you say?
It's funny because the way I think about, an ideal speaker, it's almost fundamentally a UniQ. Maybe I've been here too long. But I mean, I really think the idea of, a speaker radiating sound into space extremely evenly, over the whole spectrum, or at least most of the spectrum where your ear is very sensitive, is really fundamentally a good idea. And UniQ does it really well. I mean, there's maybe some other ways you could try and do it, but UniQ does it really well. And I think if it wasn't UniQ, how would I do it? I would, probably do something quite different, not, this kind of more conventional arrangement with separate drivers. So it's very fundamental to how I think. And a lot of our technology planning for the future, is based on what we could do with UniQ as well. It's quite fundamental here.
If you're looking back at your career and now, let's say somebody's starting where you were, came out of university, what would you tell them from what you know now in 15 years, roughly? As the best way, not just to get ahead, but to approach the job.
I think the thing I really appreciate about KEF is being given the opportunities, to be allowed to be creative, work hard, work on things, and get them into product. I don't think that's that normal, is the way I see the industry. So, being in an environment that allows you to innovate and contribute is quite rare. That's the thing that I actually think is important. So with the engineering team we have, which includes a lot of guys who are quite young, and we take in new graduates and we have interns, that's the thing I hope we can still foster, is this inclusiveness, this idea that we're kind of shared development. It's not really about like anybody's idea being more important. We're trying to explore in general how we could do things, and if somebody's got a good idea, I hope we still have an environment where it can come to the fore and end up somewhere good, because that's what I think was key for me. If you've got enthusiasm and some ability, and you're prepared to work hard, if you go somewhere that nurtures that, then that's a wonderful experience. It can so easily go the opposite way. If you go somewhere where nobody wants to hear about new ideas, or they're quite closed off because they've got ways of working, or even because there's egos involved that don't let other contributions come in, I think that would be really a horrible situation. So it's more about that for me. I think I know I've been very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, and in a company that's allowed me to contribute a lot. So that's not always going to be the same for everybody, I think.
Now, we talked about simulations and stuff. You're obviously, here at KEF, I see that you listen, but measurements are huge.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody who says measurements don't matter?
Well, I think the thing for me is how do you keep making an improvement if you're only doing it on listening? That's the thing I I would struggle with, because when you're in the listening room and you've got a single product, you can tweak things, you can play around with things, and you will be able to make differences. Being totally objective and saying, well, is this always an improvement, can be very difficult. That's something that's quite a struggle. But if you don't know, say you do make an improvement, if you don't know why you made an improvement, or you can't give it any kind of emphasis, proportionality, how important was that? What was it that changed to make that improvement? Then it's very difficult to put a structure in to do research onto what you should do next year or in 2 years' time. So again, this comes back to the kind of idea that you can engineer a speaker. If you're going to try and engineer a speaker and have a long-term research plan and things you're going to try and achieve, how are you going to map that out if you don't have a link between what you're listening to and what you can measure and what you can simulate? I don't think you can do it. So I think you can't focus on one or the other. You have to try and do everything.
Do you think we have all the tools now in terms of measuring loudspeakers, or do you think there are things that we don't know?
No, I think we have all the tools to be able to fully measure a speaker and characterize what it's going to sound like. That isn't really, I think, the problem. The difficulty is more understanding what that means. So, I mean, I think if you take something like an amplifier, we know we have an input and we have an output. So we know whatever we're going to measure at that one output. So it's kind of like a black box with one input and one output. But a speaker radiates sound in 3 dimensions. And then you put it into an environment that has got lots of reflections in 3 dimensions as well. So understanding how the two interact and then how the listener is going to perceive that sound is very challenging.
And how far along do you think we are in understanding what we measure to what the listener perceives?
In some respects, pretty good, I think. I mean, certainly...
Pretty good doesn't sound great.
Understatement.
Okay.
No, in some respects, I think we understand very well. So, I mean, if you take something like audibility of resonance or audibility of distortion, there's a lot of studies done on that, and I think they give us a very good approximation of the thresholds of what you can perceive. And even if you take a pessimistic view, you can knock, let's say you take 10 dB further than that, then it gives you a window of what you're trying to do. In other respects, it's quite challenging because with the loudspeaker design, it's quite hard to make one design that can do everything. And as soon as you try and balance compromises, you end up with questions that are quite tricky to answer. So should I make this speaker have more bass, but then it's going to have more distortion? Or not. What's the right answer there? What's the right balance? Or you get these kind of compromises everywhere. So if I make the cabinet bigger, then maybe I'm going to get a standing wave in there. So I've introduced a resonance. So have I improved things overall? Because now I've got a resonance because of the standing wave, but I've got more bass as well, which is probably a benefit. So the balance of all of the different factors is the thing that's very tricky. I do think there's a lot of very useful information out there that's been published on ideal loudspeaker directivity, for example, with the work that Sean Olive's done. I really appreciate that, and that helps us a lot. But in an individual speaker design, you've still got to figure out the right recipe to get the best possible result.
And do you think listeners vary that much, or do we roughly hear the same?
No, I do. I really think roughly yes. But when you're talking about the audiophile audience, roughly doesn't cut it. We're talking then about the detailed experience of listening, and our customers are quite rightly very precise about what they want. And I have noticed that if you get my colleagues, you get 6 or 7 of us in a room and we listen to a system, the comments, you also get some which are consistent across everybody, and then you'll get some people who always have a particular thing that they're listening for in the bass and the mid and the treble. And different people's red lines can be very different. So for you and I, we might listen to one speaker and I'd say, oh, no, I can't listen to that. I really, really don't like the bass. And it's not that you haven't heard the characteristic. It's just for you, that's fine. You're all about something else in the audio spectrum. So trying to make a product where it's completely flawless and going to please everybody. I really value the opinions of others when we're developing it and listening to it. And I really don't think, we'd get a good result if I'm just doing all the listening myself.
Has there anything from all your education and your ideas come to totally surprise you that you took for granted as this is great to do or good to do in a loudspeaker design, but had you rethink it?
That's an interesting question. Yes and no. I mean, I think generally whenever we've got something that surprises us, we try and follow it up and find out what's going on with it. And we've never had a situation where we haven't been able to kind of make everything add up, if you see what I mean. So no great mysteries, if you see. Sometimes you really have to search around for what it is and you're not entirely sure, and you have to design a way to confirm what you were hearing. That's certainly the case, but not particularly. I mean, you get these moments though where things surprise you.
Give me an example. Do you have one?
The one that always gets me is there's this kind of psychoacoustic thing of when you have a small speaker which gives fuller sound than you're expecting, it's really impressive. And I don't know if that's because I'm looking at it with a kind of engineer's perspective of going, wow, how's it doing that? But for me, there's these kind of like moments where you go, if the imaging comes together and you get this amazing spread of sound, you kind of get these moments where you go, wow, that, just taking a step back from the nitty-gritty detail, wow, that's amazing. It's, a real illusion is making me feel something, and, you have the moments in development where you go, oh, I'm really just enjoying this. I get those a lot.
Okay, so what you said there about a small speaker, because sometimes, do you think it's psychological? I'll hear a small speaker make a big sound.
Yeah.
And conversely, I get disappointed if I see a big speaker that doesn't necessarily sound bigger than it is.
Yeah.
Do you think that's psychological?
Yes.
Or do you think, yeah?
I do, because I think we're used to the fact that in nature, large things make deep noises, right? A double bass is big, a violin's not. The double bass makes deep noises, a pipe organ. So even people, right? You don't meet little people who have deep voices. So, whether you're thinking about it or not. But as an acoustician, there's a relationship between frequency and wavelength, which means to efficiently produce deep sound, deep bass notes, it needs to be big. And I think that is kind of in everybody's mind. And if you kind of break the rule, there's kind of this moment where somebody goes, oh, that shouldn't happen. That's, quite powerful. A small speaker that can do really deep bass, it's still, a surprising thing.
From an acoustics point of view, many people assume bigger is better. But can bigger, past a point, cause more problems?
Yes.
And bigger becomes much worse?
Yeah, absolutely. So bigger, simply in terms of efficiency, bass extension and size, bigger is better. If you write down the equations, bigger gives you
more sound, more bass,
or
more
deeper bass. Right. But this is based on a very simple model of what happens in a loudspeaker. And when you get up to frequencies where that model breaks down, more complex stuff happens. So that could be standing waves in the cabinet, that could be panel resonances, that could be breakup of the cone, that could be directivity changes because you've got a large radiator. So if you make something bigger, then it helps in the kind of scale of the sound, but it moves these problems down. So no, it's not always bigger is better. And I think some of the, there's a certain listener who likes a small loudspeaker, and we were talking about kind of priorities of the listener before. So if your priority isn't all about the deep bass and the scale of the sound, maybe you would have an affinity towards a small loudspeaker, because you can give up that aspect and you gain something else, which is that you don't have problems of panel resonances as severely, you don't have the standing waves as severely.
Or maybe the driver spacing can be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tricky. And actually probably more obvious to me from pro audio work, because a big pro audio compression driver is very heavily optimized towards efficiency at the expense of response smoothness and lack of resonance. And it's really, really challenging to make a big driver work all the way up through the whole audio band. That's very, very difficult.
We've talked about listening. Let's say you were the only listener, so people understand you better. When you sit down and listen to a system, what are the three most important things that jump off the top of your head?
Well, I always try and not be too analytic about things, actually. I mean, for me, there's kind of red lines, definitely.
Which are?
Piano is one thing for me. I used to play piano really well, and I then didn't have a piano for 15 years. And now I can't sit in front of one because I get depressed how terrible I am. But I think you get used to the sound of a piano, and it's an interesting instrument because it is very even. And when you play up and down the keyboard of a good piano, you get a good even tone at all frequencies, at all different notes. And there's a lot of speakers that can't do that, that you hear the transitions between different parts of the speaker, and it changes the character of the instrument. So that's kind of, it has to do that for me.
And for me, piano is important because I find a lot of speakers can't reproduce the weight without distorting, or just are unable to.
And there's, I mean, you've got the tone of the piano string, but you've actually got a lot of percussion in there as well, which is quite hard to do. You get the right balance between, you know, a hammer on a piano actually sounds quite woody, and it doesn't sound very metallic. And you know, getting that balance right is challenging because you don't just have to get it right in a small bandwidth. Piano covers such a wide bandwidth, so kind of, you know, that I would listen to analytically. And I think if you can get that right, and also if you can get voices to sound right without too much dullness or too much sibilance, that's the thing for me, is this balance between the two. Then, you know, you kind of got the ingredients of something good there. I then, you know, find at that point, you know, trying to listen to your impression of the overall speaker is important as well. Is it putting things together in a cohesive way? And also, are you enjoying it? That's something, I mean, you have to try not to lose sight of that. It's kind of not really about what the speaker's trying to emphasize or trying to communicate, because the speaker's trying to just deliver what you want to listen to, right? It's in a way just a tool, right, to listen to music. So you should think about it like that when you're listening to it as well. Just say, well, am I getting into this? Am I getting a connection with what I want to listen to? So I kind of like as well evaluating products on my own and, you know, listening to things that maybe I just listen to at home, you know, guilty pleasures, whatever you want to call them, because you get a different connection to what you're listening to then. Just say, well, you know, could I live with these? Am I going to enjoy these if I had them for myself late at night or whatever? So.
Yeah. And do you think in loudspeaker design, do you still think there's a lot of work that can be done?
Yeah, I do. I think in a few aspects, I think we're still able to make fairly big improvements because they're quite crude devices, actually. That's actually part of the fascination for me, is you can make a speaker, you know, from bits of paper and wire and magnets, right? It might not sound very good, but you can do it. And there's this kind of magical element to it. You think, well, this is really crude. How's it making such an amazing sound? You know, I'm reproducing something that was recorded 80 years ago with this paper and wire. So it is relatively crude in the sense that it's still moving parts and it's still permanent magnets and so on. And as soon as you start to look into the detail of a driver or a cabinet, you can identify problems. So you can definitely improve them from an engineering perspective by dealing with these problems. And at the moment, when we make improvements like that and we take them into the listening room or we demo them to people, we can hear improvements. Now, maybe there's one day where we're measuring stuff and we fix it and we go, oh, well, that didn't matter. But I don't feel like we're there yet. I think we've got quite a lot to do. And then the other aspect is trying to deliver better sound in more convenient ways is a big thing. So you mentioned about big speakers. So really at the moment we're still having to have very large speakers if we really want to cover the whole audio spectrum. And that's a fundamental restriction because of the physics of the situation. But there's possibilities in Active to push that a bit harder, make products where, you know, we're able to deliver fuller sound from more compact enclosures. And that's quite exciting, because I think there's a lot of people who'd probably like to have a fuller sound, a bigger system than they can actually fit in their home. So that's potentially exciting, you know, to deliver better sound to you know, people who don't have a lot of space.
So enough work for another 15 years.
Yeah, I really hope so.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack. It was enlightening.
Thanks, Doug. Nice to talk to you.